A simple woman forced to solve calculus to mock her, but her genius shocks the entire class. San Juan's morning sun filtered through the palm trees lining the University of Puerto Rico's campus, the air thick with the scent of salt and blooming hibiscus. Elena Morales, 32, stood at the edge of the mathematics building, her worn sneakers scuffing the cobblestone path. In her faded blue janitor's uniform, a name tag pinned crookedly to her chest, she looked out of place among the students rushing past with backpacks and laptops. Her hands fidgeted with the strap of a tattered canvas bag, a nervous habit she'd carried since childhood, and she whispered to herself in Spanish, "Tú puedes, Elena, no dejes que te vean temblar." You can do this. Don't let them see you shake. At a small school in Santurce, Elena swept floors and scrubbed desks, her $200 monthly paycheck barely covering rent for the tiny apartment she shared with her aging mother. But at night, when the world quieted, she'd pull out library books on calculus, their pages yellowed and dog-eared, and lose herself in equations. Numbers were her refuge, ever since her father left when she was 12, leaving her to help her mother sell tamales on weekends to pay the bills. She'd taught herself algebra by 15, calculus by 20, solving problems on napkins during lunch breaks, while her co-workers gossiped about telenovelas. Online math forums became her secret world. She'd solved problems that stumped graduate students, her username Luz de San Juan, earning quiet respect. The opportunity came unexpectedly. A university outreach program seeking untapped talent in underserved communities had found her through an online competition. "Your solutions are extraordinary," Dr. Luis Vargas had said over the phone, his voice warm but firm. "We'd like you to audit our advanced calculus course. There's a scholarship if you prove yourself." Elena had almost hung up, her, in a university. She'd never finished high school, dropping out to work when her mother fell ill. But the memory of her father's last words, "You're nothing special, Elena," lit a fire in her. She'd said yes, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes?" Now, standing outside the lecture hall, she caught her reflection in the glass door. Simple clothes, no makeup, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun. She didn't look like a mathematician, just a janitor with a dream too big for her world. Oh, the halls buzzed with Spanish and English, students clutching textbooks she'd only read in library corners. "Room 204, she muttered, checking a crumpled flyer. Advanced Calculus with Dr. Carmen Rivera, a name Elena knew from dog-eared journals, a professor as brilliant as she was ruthless. She pushed open the door, her heart pounding like a drum at a festival. The lecture hall fell quiet, rows of students in trendy clothes turning to stare at the woman in the janitor's uniform. Elena slipped into a seat near the back, her hands trembling as she pulled out a notebook, paper, not digital, and a single pencil. Whispers followed. "¿Quién es ella?" "Some program for nobodies." Elena kept her eyes down, but inside, a spark of hope flickered. She'd show them she belonged. The lecture hall at the University of Puerto Rico buzzed with quiet chatter as Elena Morales sat in the back, her hands clutching her notebook like a lifeline. The room's high ceilings and wooden walls, adorned with faded portraits of mathematicians, felt like a world she'd only dreamed of entering. At 32, in her faded janitor's uniform, she was a stranger among the students in their trendy clothes, their voices a mix of Spanish and English, discussing theorems she'd only read about in borrowed books. Her heart raced, the weight of the stairs pressing down, but she kept her gaze on her pencil, its tip worn from years of late-night equations. Dr. Carmen Rivera entered through a side door, her heels clicking sharply against the tiled floor. At 50, she was a legend in San Juan's academic circles, her tailored red blazer and sleek black skirt, a stark contrast to Elena's simplicity. Her dark eyes scanned the room, landing on Elena with a flicker of disdain. "Welcome to Advanced Calculus," she announced in Spanish, her voice crisp and commanding. "This course is for those who belong." If you don't, the drop period ends Friday. The message was clear. Elena, with her worn sneakers and lack of credentials, was an outsider. The lecture began, and Elena was captivated. Dr. Rivera's explanations of multivariable calculus were sharp, elegant, like the equations Elena had traced on napkins during her lunch breaks. She scribbled notes, her mind racing to connect concepts she'd taught herself with the professor's frameworks. Occasionally, she'd spot a pattern just before Dr. Rivera revealed it, a small thrill warming her chest. But the whispers around her grew louder. Que hate una conserje aquí? She'll be gone by next week. A young man in a polo shirt smirked, leaning toward his friend. Bet she cries before class ends. Elena's fingers tightened around her pencil, her face burning. She'd faced judgment before. Her father's voice echoed. You're nothing special, Elena, the day he walked out. But she'd promised her mother she'd try, even if it meant facing a room full of doubt. Dr. Rivera turned to the chalkboard, writing a complex equation with nested integrals. The standard approach to this problem requires careful substitution, she explained, her tone almost musical. Elena nodded to herself. She'd solved a similar problem last month, finding a shortcut that cut the steps in half. Something to add, Miss Morales? Dr. Rivera's voice sliced through the room, her eyes narrowing on Elena. The class fell silent, all heads turning. Elena froze, her throat dry. No, Professora, she said softly, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Dr. Rivera's lips curled into a faint, cold smile. Since you seem so engaged, perhaps you'd like to solve this for us. She gestured to the board, the equation a daunting challenge. Show us what a janitor knows about calculus. Elena Morales stood at the front of the University of Puerto Rico's lecture hall, the chalk trembling slightly in her hand as she faced the complex equation on the board. The room was so quiet she could hear the hum of the air conditioning, the weight of 30 pairs of eyes, students in their trendy clothes, Dr. Carmen Rivera with her cold smirk pressing against her. At 32, in her faded janitor's uniform, Elena felt like an imposter in this world of polished wood and academic prestige. But the equation wasn't foreign. It was a variation of one she'd solved on a humid Santurce night, her mother asleep in the next room, the only light, a flickering bulb. Whenever you're ready, Miss Morales, Dr. Rivera said, her voice dripping with false encouragement, her arms crossed in her red blazer. The students whispered in Spanish, Se va a caer, their snickers sharp like the wind outside. Elena took a deep breath, the scent of chalk dust grounding her. She thought of her mother's hands, rough from years of making tamales, and the promise she'd made to prove she was more than her father's words, "You're nothing special." Her hand steadied, and she began to write. The equation was a multivariable calculus problem with nested integrals, the kind that demanded careful substitution. Elena started with the standard approach, her handwriting neat on the board, but at the third step, she paused. She'd found a shortcut months ago, one that bypassed the tedious steps Dr. Rivera expected. Her chalk moved again, this time with a quiet confidence, as she applied a hyperbolic substitution that simplified the complexity. Behind her, a student gasped softly, the whispers fading. Elena didn't hear them. She was lost in the numbers, the same way she'd been at 15, solving algebra on napkins while her classmates laughed at her secondhand shoes. 5 minutes in, she heard Dr. Rivera's heel tap the floor, a sign of impatience or unease. Elena double-checked her work in her mind, her heart pounding like the drums at a San Juan festival, then wrote the final transformation. The solution flowed naturally, elegant in its simplicity, and she boxed the answer with a soft click of the chalk. Only then did she turn around, her breath shallow, to face the room. Dr. Rivera stepped forward, her dark eyes scanning the board, searching for a mistake. The smugness on her face faltered, replaced by a flicker of surprise. A student in the front row leaned forward, his earlier smirk gone. "That's not the textbook method," he muttered. Dr. Luis Vargas, the kind professor who'd invited Elena, moved closer, his eyes widening. "She bypassed the standard substitution entirely," he said, his voice soft with awe. "It's brilliant." Elena clasped her hands to stop them from shaking, her voice steady as she met Dr. Rivera's gaze. "May I return to my seat, Professora?" For the first time the room saw her, not as a janitor, but as a mathematician. Elena Morales walked back to her seat in the University of Puerto Rico's lecture hall, her worn sneakers silent on the tiled floor, the weight of the moment settling into her bones. The room buzzed with whispers in Spanish, the students' earlier smirks replaced by wide-eyed curiosity. At 32, in her faded janitor's uniform, she'd just solved a calculus problem that left even Dr. Carmen Rivera speechless. Elena sat down, her hands still trembling from the chalk, but inside a quiet warmth bloomed, like the first light of dawn over San Juan's beaches. Dr. Rivera stood at the board, her red blazer stark against the blackboard, her lips pressed into a thin line as she traced Elena's solution. The silence stretched, broken only by the rustle of a notebook, as a student in the front row leaned forward, his earlier disdain gone. "That substitution, it's not even in the syllabus," he whispered to his friend, who nodded, eyes still on Elena. Dr. Luis Vargas, the kind professor who'd brought Elena into the program, stepped closer to the board, his face lit with admiration. "This approach is graduate level," he said, turning to Dr. Rivera. "She simplified a method I've only seen in research journals." Dr. Rivera's jaw tightened, but she couldn't deny the math. "An interesting method, Miss Morales," she said, her voice tight, the words sounding like they cost her, though unconventional approaches can lead to errors in more complex problems. It was as close to praise as she'd come, but Elena didn't need more. She'd seen the shift in the room. The student beside her, who'd scoffed earlier, now shifted to make space, his gaze flickering with something like respect. Class dismissed, but the energy lingered. As students gathered their things, a young woman with braided hair approached Elena, her voice hesitant. "Oye, that was incredible," she said in Spanish. "How did you learn that? I've been struggling with integrals all semester." Elena blinked, unused to such attention, her cheeks warming. I taught myself," she replied softly, her fingers brushing the edge of her notebook. "Numbers always made sense when nothing else did." The woman smiled, genuine warmth in her eyes. "There's a study group on Thursdays. Join us?" Elena nodded, her throat tight with emotion. As she packed her bag, Dr. Vargas approached, his smile as bright as the San Juan sun outside. "Elena, can we speak in my office?" he asked. "Your talent. We need to discuss a formal scholarship." Corway, she followed him into the hall, the tropical breeze drifting through open windows, carrying the scent of salt and freedom. For the first time in years, Elena felt seen, not as a janitor but as a mathematician, her father's harsh words fading like a distant storm. She belonged here, and now everyone knew it. Elena Morales stepped out of the University of Puerto Rico's mathematics building, the late afternoon sun casting golden rays over San Juan's campus. The tropical breeze carried the scent of salt and mango blossoms, rustling the palm trees as she paused on the cobblestone path. At 32, in her faded janitor's uniform, she felt different, lighter, as if the weight of years of doubt had lifted. Her canvas bag hung on her shoulder, heavier now with Dr. Luis Vargas's words. "We're recommending you for a full scholarship, Elena. You belong here." Her heart swelled, a quiet joy blooming like the hibiscus flowers lining the walkway. She walked toward the bus stop, her worn sneakers steady on the ground, replaying the day in her mind. The lecture hall's stunned silence, Dr. Carmen Rivera's tight-lipped acknowledgement, the student's invitation to a study group. It all felt like a dream. But the warmth in her chest was real as the memory of her mother's voice, soft and proud, when Elena had called her during the break. "Mija, I always knew you were special," her mother had said in Spanish, her words a balm to the scars left by her father's dismissal. Elena had smiled, tears in her eyes, promising to make her proud. Students passed by, some glancing at her with curiosity, others with a nod of acknowledgement. Word had spread. La Conserje, who'd outsmarted a calculus problem even Dr. Rivera couldn't fault. A young man from her class, the one who'd smirked earlier, caught up to her. "Oye, Elena," he said, his tone softer now. "That substitution you used, I've never seen it before. Can you explain it sometime?" She blinked, surprised, then nodded. "Claro, maybe at the study group," she replied, her voice steady, a newfound confidence in her words. As she reached the bus stop, she noticed Dr. Rivera exiting the building, her red blazer catching the sunlight. Their eyes met across the distance, and for a moment, time held still. There was no smile, no wave, but a flicker of recognition in Dr. Rivera's gaze, not of an outsider, but of a mathematician. She gave a curt nod before turning away, her heels clicking toward the faculty lot. Elena exhaled, a smile tugging at her lips. She didn't need Dr. Rivera's approval. She'd earned her place, and that was enough. The bus rumbled up, its doors creaking open, and Elena boarded, taking a seat by the window. As San Juan's colorful streets rolled by, she thought of the nights she'd spent solving equations by lamplight, her mother's tamales cooling on the table. She'd always known numbers held a magic the world couldn't take away. Now, the world knew it too. Elena Morales, the janitor from Santurce, was a mathematician, and her journey had just begun. Elena Morales sat in the University of Puerto Rico's library, the late morning sun streaming through tall windows, casting golden patterns on the wooden table. At 32, she was still in her janitor's uniform, but her canvas bag now held a new notebook gifted by Dr. Luis Vargas after their meeting. She traced its cover, her fingers lingering on the crisp pages, a symbol of the scholarship he'd promised. The library buzzed softly with students, their voices a mix of Spanish and English. But for the first time, Elena didn't feel like an outsider. She'd solved a calculus problem that stunned her class. Her place here was earned, even if the whispers of La Conserje still followed her. She opened her textbook, a second-hand copy of Dr. Carmen Rivera's Advanced Calculus, its margins already filled with her notes. The equations felt like old friends, their patterns a comfort she'd clung to during years of struggle. But today her mind wandered to her mother's words from last night. "Mija, you're making us proud. Your father was wrong." Elena's throat tightened, the memory of her father's departure at 12 still sharp, his voice cold. "You'll never be anything." She'd spent years proving him wrong in secret, but now the world was starting to see. A shadow fell over her table, and Elena looked up to see the young woman from her class, the one with braided hair who'd invited her to the study group. "Elena, verdad?" she asked, her smile warm. "I'm Marisol. We're meeting now, study group. You coming?" Elena hesitated, her old insecurities creeping in. Would they really want her there? But Marisol's genuine tone, the way she waited patiently, gave her courage. "See, I'll come," Elena said, her voice soft but firm, gathering her things with a nervous flutter in her chest. The study group met in a small room off the library, its walls lined with books and a chalkboard in the corner. 5 students sat around a table, their laptops open, discussing a differential equation. They glanced up as Elena entered, and she braced for judgment, but Marisol waved her over. "Guys, this is Elena, the one who solved Rivera's problem," she said, her tone proud. A guy in a baseball cap nodded, his earlier skepticism gone. "That substitution was wild," he said. "Can you show us?" Elena sat down, her hands steady, as she opened her notebook. For the first time, she wasn't solving alone in the dark. She was sharing her light. As she explained her method, her voice grew stronger, the equations on the board a bridge between her past and this new world. She belonged here, and with every step, she was proving it, not just to them, but to herself. Elena Morales stood outside the University of Puerto Rico's mathematics building, the midday sun warming her face, as she clutched a flyer for the department's research journal. It had been a week since she'd joined the study group, and word of her talent had spread like wildfire across San Juan's campus. At 32, she still wore her janitor's uniform, but the students passing by no longer whispered, "La concierge," with disdain. Some even smiled, others stopped to ask about her calculus methods. Her canvas bag felt heavier now, filled with borrowed textbooks and a letter from Dr. Luis Vargas. "Submit your substitution method to the journal, Elena. It's groundbreaking." She walked to her usual spot in the library, the scent of old books and coffee grounding her as she sat down. Marisol and the study group had become her anchor late-night sessions, filled with laughter and equations, their laptops glowing as they tackled problems together. Last night, Marisol had shared her own story, dropping out of high school to help her family, only to return years later. "We're not so different, Elena," she had said, her hand squeezing Elena's. The memory warmed her, a reminder that she wasn't alone in her fight. Elena opened her notebook, her neat handwriting mapping out the substitution method she'd used in Dr. Rivera's class. She'd refined it over the week, her mind buzzing with ideas to make it even more efficient. As she worked, a shadow fell over her table. She looked up to see Dr. Rivera herself, her red blazer as striking as ever, her dark eyes unreadable. "Miss Morales," she said, her voice formal, "I've reviewed your solution again. It's unconventional but effective. Dr. Vargas tells me you're submitting it to the journal." Elena nodded, her throat tight. "Yes, Professora," she replied, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. Dr. Rivera's gaze softened just a fraction. "I misjudged you," she said, the words clipped but sincere. "Your approach, it's not something I'd teach, but it works. Keep pushing." She turned to leave, her heels clicking, but paused. "And get a proper uniform. You're a student now." Elena stared after her, a mix of shock and pride swelling inside her. For the first time, she felt truly seen, not as an outsider, but as a peer. That evening, Elena called her mother, her voice trembling with excitement as she shared the news. "Mija, I knew you'd shine," her mother said, her words a melody over the phone. As the sun set over San Juan, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Elena felt a new chapter beginning, one where her light, once hidden, now burned bright for all to see. Elena Morales stood on the University of Puerto Rico's main quad, the early evening air warm with a scent of salt and blooming jasmine. It had been a month since her calculus triumph, and at 32 she no longer wore her janitor's uniform. A simple white blouse and black pants, bought with her first scholarship stipend, felt like a new skin. Her canvas bag was gone, replaced by a backpack filled with textbooks, her name now on the university's roster as a formal student. The palm trees swayed gently, and the chatter of students filled the air, their voices a comforting hum as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in fiery hues. She'd just come from the mathematics department, where her substitution method had been published in the research journal, a small article, but her name in print felt like a victory. Dr. Luis Vargas had hugged her, his eyes shining with pride. "You're changing the game, Elena," he'd said, handing her a copy of the journal. Marisol and the study group had thrown her a small celebration in the library, complete with pastelitos and laughter, their voices echoing as they toasted to her success. "To Elena, the genius who showed us all," Marisol had cheered, her braided hair catching the light. As Elena walked across the quad, she spotted Dr. Carmen Rivera near the faculty building, her red blazer unmistakable. Their eyes met, and this time, Dr. Rivera offered a small, genuine nod, a silent acknowledgement of Elena's place in this world. Elena smiled back, her heart full. She thought of her mother, who'd framed the journal article on their apartment wall, her hands trembling with pride as she'd said, "Mija, this is your legacy." The memory of her father's harsh words, "You're nothing special," had faded, replaced by the voices of those who now saw her light. A group of new students approached her, one of them clutching a calculus textbook. "You're Elena Morales, right?" a young woman asked, her voice shy. "I read your article. It helped me with my homework. Can you explain that substitution again?" Elena nodded, her confidence steady, and sat with them on the grass, the equations flowing as naturally as the San Juan breeze. She was no longer the janitor hiding her talent. She was a mathematician, a mentor, a part of this community. As the stars began to peek through the twilight sky, Elena headed to the bus stop, her steps light. She'd always known numbers held a magic no one could take away, but now she'd built a bridge between her past and her future. Elena Morales, the simple woman from Santurce, had found her true belonging, not just in the world of calculus, but in the hearts of those who finally saw her for who she was. Thank you for joining us on Elena Morales' incredible journey in a simple woman forced to solve calculus to mock her, but her genius shocks the entire class. Her story reminds us that true brilliance can shine from the most unexpected places, proving that passion and perseverance can break any barrier. We're so grateful for your support. It means the world to Timelens Stories. If Elena's triumph inspired you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt stories. Let us know in the comment as what you thought. Your feedback helps us grow. Until next time, keep shining.